Well, it was nice that you sent me as an input your, I think your latest piece, is it? The Tale of Time?
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It, it,
Um,
it's very fascinating. I think the thing that fascinated me most was your treatment of time, actually, because it was like time, well, time always exists, but it was time was flowing more slowly in a good sense.
hmm.
The piece felt much longer than it actually was. It was
Okay,
like,
I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
no, I think it's good. I think I like it because it's not a sense of boredom or in activity or something like that, because there's so much going on. But the way you treat the the succession of happenings is quite different. First, I thought maybe it's because you have different types of textures and different strategies, but probably it's more internal. I think it has to be something with rhythm more than texture. I mean, I
Mm.
don't know the piece so well because I couldn't see the notes also so well. So it was more like first listening analysis, but it was striking. I liked it very much. It was very fresh and probably quite uh, a new approach. I don't know. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you, Charles, for listening to it. And also I listened to your piece. That's part of the mimicry cycle.
Ah,
So, and it
yes.
was interesting that you already started to find some connections between our work, because maybe we just backtrack a little bit before completely
Yes.
plunging into the sort of compositional
Yes.
conversation, because we only met in the summer in Finland, in
Mhm.
Viitasaari, and then
Mhm.
suddenly we're in close proximity with a couple of
Yes.
concerts in
Yes.
Lucerne and in Huddersfield, and it's like suddenly our orbits have kind of combined.
Exactly. Exactly.
Really very interesting.
Also, in retrospect, I mean, this mother tongue thing is also striking, isn't it?
Yeah,
That you composed a piece 10 years ago or so with the
mhm.
same title.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess part of our conversation can be, the sort of resonances between, but maybe the great differences also between our approaches. And yeah, I mean, it's simultaneously easy and hard to talk about time, because time is the kind of material of our work as composers, the
Mm,
temporalities and the flow of events and perceptual time, as you were
mm,
saying, you perceive the work to be sort of quite different from its
mm,
measured clock time. But yeah, that piece that I mean is called The Tailor of Time,
mm,
and it really the thing I was very intrigued by were these lines in the Persian, the 13th century Sufi poet Rumi, these
mm,
paradoxical lines where
mm, mm,
he talks about time as this material, that the tailors sew these beautiful clothes by tearing them to pieces, that the tailor has never sewn a shirt. The tailor of time has never sewn a shirt for any man without tearing it to pieces. So to make something, you have to unmake it. To
mm.
kind of form something in time, you actually have to pull it apart and
Yes.
destroy it.
Mm,
So that was the kind of paradox I was very
mm,
interested in,
mm.
and tried to find different ways into it. Kind of quite playful and absurd ways. There are
Yes.
these
Yes.
kind of
Mm,
really dumb theatrical things that happen in the work, where this percussionist builds up this tower of kind of
mm,
objects, percussion instruments and kitchen objects, and then inevitably it falls down, and it's like
mm.
everything slips from one's grasp, and
Yes.
then you try and do it again, and then it's,
Yes.
oh my god, it's failure again, and it
Yes.
destroys the activity of the ensemble
Yes. Yes.
begin again. And so
Yeah.
that became a kind of motto, a
Uh-huh.
sort of figure that I tried to actually notate in different
Yes,
ways.
yes.
Yeah,
It's
so
like,
that was kind of the idea behind the work.
yes, yes, it felt like chaos coming into perfect order. Yeah. And it also reminded me on this Tibetan Buddhist mandala monks who make these mandalas with very much care, and
Mm.
it's so time consuming, and with sand and colors and forms, and then in the end they destroy it.
They sweep it away. That's
Yes,
right. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I like the gesture, but I thought it was very courageous to do it as
Mhm.
in the composition, because
Oh, okay.
it's also a kind of Sisyphus hint, maybe, like
Mm.
all we try to achieve and to calculate carefully in our hearts and our minds is for nothing, actually.
Oh,
In
yeah,
regard to time, it doesn't really
yeah.
matter which note we put. It will all be gone, with
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
I
Yes,
thought
maybe
it was
maybe
very
I have a
courageous.
slightly less bleak outlook on that.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, that Sisyphean thing, where you're trying to roll the rock up the hill and then it sort of falls. I mean, to me, it is a gesture of our times,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
everything that the world is undergoing feels like that, to
yeah,
me
yeah, yeah.
anyway. But yeah, I mean, thank you for listening and reflecting on it. But you mentioned that time is an absolutely central concern for you, and actually
Mm.
use melody to kind of
Yes.
contemplate time. I wonder whether you can say more about that.
Um, I always find it immensely difficult to talk about it, although I have been working on it since maybe 30 or 40 years. It was actually the central theme of my thesis on time and melody, starting from the Husserlian thought that time is actually the perfect tool, or rather, melody is the perfect tool for measuring time, and time is the perfect tool for measuring our existence and the entire philosophy. So all comes back to time, and time comes back to a tone. And Husserl talks about how the tone passes. Like, in listening to a tone, we can perceive what he sees as the world, and
Mm,
as the uh, even not the world, but the perception of the world. So
mm,
it's a very internal philosophy where he tries to measure the tone and to divide it into the million parts of the now. And I take it as I mean, for me, as a catapult to try to find new forms of melody building
mhm,
where the single tone is actually forming, well, this sounds very queer, but the single tone is in itself forming the entire melody. Because Husserl was saying that when you perceive a melody, it's not a materialistic thing that you can count each note, and then
mm,
when you have counted every note, then you perceive it as a gestalt, as a
mm,
form of the melody.
mm,
But it's rather something else. It's rather something that clicks or kicks in, maybe suddenly, even for melodies you didn't know before.
mhm,
So if you listen to a melody, then the melody being is not the sum of the notes,
mm,
uh, but it's more like something else. And I was wondering, what is it? Is it the rhythm
mhm,
underneath? Is it the harmonic progression? Or is it the distribution of the tones
mhm,
linking together in a sort of order where, as a listener, you can subconsciously detect the order, and then you
mm,
sort of know where the melody goes, and it gives an imprint into your soul, and then you feel like now this is the melody, and then it can go on in different ways. I mean, it's
Mm,
flexible, but
mm,
the core of the melody is already there.
mm,
And for Husserl, this was like a metaphor for how we perceive everything. I mean, when you
mm,
perceive anything, then it's not the perception of all its parts, but it's a perception at once of its essence, be it its form or its smell or its looks, or or the
mm,
taste of it. It's the phenomenology is something more universal and not material materially analytical.
mm,
uh, and
mm,
and by that I tried to compose melodies, um, starting from the tone and its partials, and then I was trying to find which partials are closer to the tone, and then with this measurement you can proceed to the next tone slowly, and always having the link to
mhm,
the fundamentals. And this
mm,
was one way of trying to build new sort of meaning or
mhm,
momentum,
mm,
melodious momentum.
mm. So the
I'm still
important
on it.
thing is the link, right? It's the
Yes,
something that joins, that allows you to experience the relations, the temporal relations,
ex
I guess, in terms of
exactly,
parts to some greater whole.
exactly. Yes,
But I
yes,
think you also you immediately extended it beyond kind of sound, the sort of the elements of sound that make up a melody, to this all at once
yes,
experience, this total
exactly.
sensory experience. Is that how
Yeah,
you hear music, as this kind of all at once sensory thing that comes to you, or how?
I think so. Maybe it's a more simple way of listening and more naive way of listening, but I've always had it. Like,
Mm,
even in rock music or any kind of music, it's just a sound, the immediate sound that strikes me. And
mm,
then afterwards, we are all a bit intellectuals. Then we try to deduct things and analyze things. But what strikes me is the immediate sound. Like, if you listen to Sibelius, for example,
mm,
any symphony by Sibelius, it has this uh, immediate, vibrant color of sound, which is so
mm,
typical, and I think, which makes people love the music. Or even Stravinsky also. Like,
mm,
there's one Stravinsky sound, and you can find it in every piece, and this is what strikes me.
mm.
I I
Yeah.
also I also hear it in Feldman, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and others, but not in many. Uh, Now I have to be very careful. I don't hear it in many complex uh, writing kind of compositions, because it doesn't
Because they're
seem
non-melodic, they evade that melodic logic. Is that why,
exactly.
maybe? Yeah.
Yes, it doesn't seem
Mm.
in their interest
Mm.
in
Mm.
conveying this sort of sensation. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. But that's interesting that that's such a primary force for you, in your
Mhm,
experience
mhm,
of music. Yeah.
mhm.
I
Yeah,
mean, do
yeah.
you really feel, is it like a very embodied thing? You feel it as a physical
Very
presence?
much so, very
Yeah.
much so. Yes, yes. More
Mm.
physically than in the brain. I mean, the brain
Mm.
is physical too, but more
Yeah.
direct, more
Yeah.
the skin. Yeah. How about you? Because I can feel this. I mean, in the color,
Mm.
I can feel much of this in the colors of your music, especially in the color in the percussion. There's suddenly
Mm.
something that, strikes me as very poignant and very, very personal also. So I
Mm.
wonder how you listen to your music
I
in
don't
that
know.
respect. It's difficult, I know, but I still wonder.
Yeah. I mean, the physicality of sound is really essential for me, and it's why collaboration performers is,
Mm,
kind of really at the center of my practice, because there's a real sort of coordination, between the things that I do, a kind of hand-eye coordination notation, as you know, is very important to me. And then how that activates and collaborates with, you know, performative gesture and the qualities, textilic qualities of sound. It's all, there's something super handmade, I think, that I'm interested in when I'm making music, and looking for a kind of idiomatic quality that comes from that artisanal handmade quality. And therefore it also admits mistakes. You know, it admits these frayed edges. It's not a kind of perfectly ordered music. You know, that's why there are these chaotic elements and things that don't really add up, and kind of weird, seemingly nonsense events that suddenly find their way in my music. It's quite messy in a way.
It's very alive. It's very alive, isn't it? It's
well,
like
it's like I feel sometimes, I mean, and in sort of recent pieces, like a piece, Extinction Events in Dawn Chorus, and then also Tale of Time, it's like there's this pile of stuff that doesn't necessarily belong to the same world, but I'm trying to find kind of resonances and rhyming, you know, kind of devices between a gesture and a musical figure and a physical action, and then gradually these threads start to turn into something. I don't really know beforehand. I don't pre-plan my work very much. I don't know whether you do. Do you sketch and make big plans for your work before you start?
I'm the planner kind of type.
You're the planner?
The control freak a little bit.
Oh,
but
okay.
I admire the way that you just let things go. And it's also when you talk about your work with the players, I think this is very important. And I admire that, because it means that you are really open for possibilities, and open to change things also, and open to learn, and to go beyond your own perception of what is right and wrong. So this is something I'm really missing. I want to learn more about this, because you don't seem to be frustrated in your work when something doesn't work, or something sounds different than you thought. Is it, or how?
I don't know. I mean, I think part of it is there's a curiosity to what if this thing happens. That's kind of a basic attitude. I mean, some things work better than others. It's not like I don't care if things don't work. That's far from the you know, the reality of it. But there's something very joyful about working with players over, you know, a long period of time, and having a close relationship. For me, that releases a kind of energy that I don't find any other way. You know, that's the liveliness, the living quality of it. That's I find very interesting.
And your writing is so meticulous. Maybe that's a basis that you can allow yourself to go into this adventure, because you have already written it down in a very meticulous way. I mean, if I look at your scores, it's very precise, actually. So maybe that's why you can allow yourself to work on it, you know, and still be within this frame of your listening, really.
I think, I mean, we began to have a little discussion about this before. You know, notation is really important for me. You know, so this kind of, you know, what seems very meticulous, not so much about controlling everything. It's for me, notation is also this collaborative partner. I'm very interested in it, what it can do, you know, what it can tell me as well.
It's like a ghost.
It is. I that's why I started talking about this sentiency of notation and music, which is
interesting.
kind of weird. You know, people think, what is that about? And it's not so much that I'm saying, oh yeah, that thing is sentient and conscious, which I actually think is kind of true in a certain way, but it's more under what circumstances can one experience that? Under what conditions can this really be very productive?
Yes.
And
so it's an individual thing. It's not a scientific kind of
oh,
approach.
well,
It's a very
clearly it's not
personal.
scientific, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's maybe it's not so far from the Husserlian idea, which is this co-emergent world.
Yes.
That there's that, I mean, he does kind of talk about this consciousness of
Yes, all the time.
things.
Yeah.
And I think it's that thing of when you don't divide, the material and the immaterial, or if you don't make that kind of the basis
the
of your
Descartesian fault. Yes.
That's right. Yeah. If you're not, if that split isn't the basis of your thinking, then these other relationships can emerge.
I
think, which I think are quite again, it's speculative, but I find really quite productive.
Yes. Do you think it has no, sorry.
No, go on, please. Yeah, go.
Do you think it has to do, because I even feel here some sort of not similarity in our approach, but similarity in our interest, to the world and to appearances of the world. And I just wonder, maybe this is a cliche, maybe not, but could it be that we are both carrying maybe a heritage that is, I mean, yours is Eastern, mine is like African Southern, that is sort of different to the Western, European Western, or Australian, English American kind of culture? Or does it not? Is it really?
I mean, it departs from a kind of Enlightenment, Cartesian understanding of the world. This idea that everything is alive and that we are dynamically interconnected. That all, that's a kind of ecological view. So I wouldn't necessarily divide it into cultural stances, but I think an ecological kind of approach is quite useful as a way of thinking. That everything counts.
Yes.
In a sort of dynamic system. But I think you're perhaps pointing to I don't know, actually, sorry, just because this is really the first big conversation we've had. Are you pointing to a kind of spiritual experience in what you're looking for in music? Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yes.
And where does that, where are the reference points for you there?
Well, I was just thinking that, I mean, your interest in Rumi, and which I share, I love him so much, and all this kind of paradoxical thinking and non-Descartesian kind of non-materialistic kind of thinking. This is very close to me, and it's so different to many of our colleagues, I find, who come from this more, I mean, you're very logical yourself also, and very intellectual, but I really think that there's a split into this kind of Stockhausen or Lachenmann kind of divisive composing, like taking music as material, and material is something you possess and you control and you can form and you can do anything with it, Whereas maybe, I just hope it's not a cliche, maybe I think you are more interested into finding something in the world that is already there and already alive, and just lets you wake it up, maybe, or wake people up to see
That's
it.
nice. I like that, waking up.
Yes, and
is that how
bit.
you feel? You feel that as a kind of?
Yes, I feel strongly like that.
Yeah.
Although our appearances are completely different, I mean, musically, and our sound is so different, but still, I maybe there's some common basis there.
I mean, the concept that we share coming up in Lucerne and also is repeated in Huddersfield. I mean, I think those thoughts are really at the basis of both of our works. I mean, yours is very much about life, death, breath.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
these really powerful essences, you know, mysterious essences. And then my work is about this collaboration with the river as a sentient being, you know, that it has personhood, and there's this movement of environmental personhood that's sweeping the world, you know, led by particularly by Indigenous activists.
Yes.
But this sense that the river, it's this particular river outside Lucerne that is the basis of the work. And these films that we made and recordings that we made, where we hear the voice of the river and the presence of the river. Something is activated there, you know. It's not just a material, it's much more, you know, we are calling forth the ancestors in the work. And there's a certain kind of empowerment of something that's going on that was addressed in various ways in the processes of making the work. I mean, when we began the work, we had to make offerings to the river and speak to it, you know, tell it our intentions and ask, you know, permission before proceeding, you know. And so that obviously that sets a very different kind of you know, context for making work and for what might be meaningful inside the work. So I guess that's kind of what I'm interested in, which is that it's not just a theme or a material or whatever. It is demanding certain things of us. And that's, I'm very curious about that. Yeah,
it speaks directly to the person, isn't it? It goes right into the heart, the listening of such a piece. I mean, it's radical because you have to be prepared. You have to be ready to allow yourself to get into it. I mean, when you get into nature, you sort of get into your soul and into yourself, isn't it? I mean, when you say that you are talking to the river, you are preaching to the river, you are singing to the river, sort of, or playing into the river, you know, with the violin. So this, I think this is very, very beautiful because it's not an environmental cliche or new kind of thing, but it's something that goes right into your soul, because you must be ready to accept that music is not something beside and not something a part of yourself, but it's something that touches you directly. It's like a person. It's like somebody you love, actually. So nature is it's like a relationship. In the best sense, you know, you have to talk to each other, you have to try to understand each other, you know. So I think this it's really a very beautiful concept to put our pieces together, because my piece is so different, you know. It's something from the outer world, so to say. It's man-made terror, you know, the theme of it. It's murder, you know. And I think it should always be played actually with your piece. Because
how
then
do how do you deal with such a violent theme? How do you bring that onto a stage, you know?
I mean, I had a lot of difficulties to be honest, and not with myself actually, because I'm a very political person, and I think about these things all the time, more than about music, really. And it just touches me so much, all what's happening here. But it's difficult to make people undergo this stress, you know. And it's also for the players, and you know, the Lausanne Ensemble, they had many difficulties, you know, to get into this and to get confronted with it. And we had a huge discussion, and I had to change. Well, I wanted to change some things
Mm-hmm.
because I felt that it's so important to listen also to the players and to their feelings, and because you can't make music if you negate your own feelings. You know, you can play brilliantly Tchaikovsky violin concerto, but you can't play a piece for George Floyd if you negate the emotions that are in it. So we had some quite tough discussions, and for me it was a great deal of learning, and I'm very thankful for it. But I really think that music may hurt also, and hurt in well, in a positive way. It's difficult to say, but in a constructive way. So because I mean, I could write books on George Floyd's murder, and you can read it or you can put it aside. But if I write a piece of music, then I think you can accept and you can realize and understand many things in a very direct and also refined way, although it's very harsh and very can be very brutal, but the reflection can be refined, you know, which maybe can happen after the concert or in the concert, whenever, you know, you're ready for it.
Yeah, I think music, I mean, many people have said this, but, you know, it does give us access to so many areas of ourselves that we don't even know exist, right? And join up those places.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. But you specifically wanted to address the George Floyd murder in your work. That was, I mean, it's clearly kind of like such a central and important
yes.
event.
I mean,
And
I think it's in this raw form of immediate reaction. It was only the second piece. I wrote a piece for the students on Tiananmen Square in 1989, you know, this when they tried to protest against the regime. But normally I don't do it so directly politically. And for me, the George Floyd murder was just it was so sad. I mean, it was the only way I could deal with it, you know. So in this way, might have been therapeutic, I don't know, but then afterward it turned to be something else more than just political. I mean, for me, the title is Catharsis Calcul, and this sense of catharsis which lingers in most of Western drama, you know, like you have to murder and you have all the blood, you know, swine blood coming down, you know, over our heads. And then after that, you get the purification and you're clean and you're a better soul. And this doesn't add up to me. This is a wrong concept. I mean, I really think Aristotle was wrong in that you don't need evil in order to purify. This is a Western sense of purification, which is later on was linked to Christianism, of course, but before it's something very deep in the Western logical thinking, and I try to turn it upside down. So the catharsis is something like a progression towards something, and in music you can turn it upside down very easily with the inversion, you know, and the crepes kind of shape. So all the chords you hear in the beginning, they appear in the end again, and it's all symmetrically mirrored. So you don't have this sense of we're going to a better place and then it's beautiful, but you have the better place at once in the beginning and in the end, and the horror is always there. So you can say it's a negative view of the world, but it's also a neutral view of the world. There's no
I
such
feel
thing
it's a way of facing things that is more powerful rather than wanting to transform.
exactly, yes,
Mm,
yes. And the way of um, r- living things and
mm,
reacting to things and
mm,
changing things
mm,
instead of letting things go and thinking, well, there's good God and the end it will be fine, or there's the law of nature, or there's physics, or there's the law of economy. You know, these
mm,
are all pretexts that make
mm,
you just linger in the worst in the worst sense of being, really, in which we are again now, you know, with the war in
mm,
Israel and Gaza. I
mm.
mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's shocking. Yeah. Yeah, I actually wrote a piece in response to, well, to the many violent things that are happening in the world. But I just finished a piece which is called Shallow Grave, and
uh-huh,
it's
uh-huh,
a Neolithic clay horn that Marco Blau is working with. It's a 3,000-year-old excavated instrument that he's had
uh-huh,
reproduced. It's very
uh-huh.
basic. It's just a horn. It's like an animal
Uh,
horn, but it's made of
okay,
it's a ceramic horn. It's
okay.
super basic. It really is this
Uh-huh,
dug up earth that makes
uh-huh.
sound,
Yeah, yeah.
because it has a
Oh,
cavity. It's so basic.
uh-huh.
But
And
yeah,
you use that instrument?
yeah. So it's
Oh,
just
really?
this
Well,
very primal sound, and it's the sound of the voice.
uh-huh.
But it contains, and I think this is kind of maybe your approach. I don't know. I mean, it's trying to deal with these incomprehensible, unbearable elements, but
Mm,
in trying to make some kind of container, some sort of ritual space.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and it's I mean, I think that is one of the fundamental powers of music, is to
mm,
do that, is to
mm,
address the hole in the ground,
mm, mm,
like early on in the war in Ukraine. I remember being really struck by this extraordinary image, and it was a gigantic, like, cavity from a a bomb, Russian bomb,
mm,
and there was a brass band. There was this Ukrainian brass band that were playing into the hole,
mm.
and it was this, to me it
Well,
just demonstrated this
mm,
aspect of music's, as I said, music's power to
mm, mm,
is the only thing that you could do
mm.
to sort of reach
Yes,
into that hole and grab back
yes,
some of
yes,
that energy that had been
yes.
kind of completely
Beautiful. Yes.
destroyed.
Uh,
And what was really striking was the absolute necessity of that gesture.
yes, yes, yes,
Like, we are going to live, we're going to play
yes,
on, this
yes,
kind of thing,
yes.
was so
Mm,
powerful. Because music is often, in when things are peaceful, music is
mm,
seen as entertainment or frivolous, or
yes,
it's a kind of a commercial transaction or whatever,
yes.
and we don't
Mm,
necessarily experience this sheer existential necessity
yes,
of
yes,
music.
yes,
Um, but I feel that, our times are really calling for that.
yes,
We need it
yes,
more than ever. I mean, I
yes. Mm,
I just find myself desperate often, where I just have to grab some music, any music, to cope
mm, mm,
when I see
mm.
so much violence in the
Yes.
world.
Mm, mm, mm.
Mm,
But yet, I think I don't know you so well, but I think you go one step beyond, and with this approach to nature, it's less an outcry, but more something trying to go deeper and to grab into the healing and soothing qualities
mm,
of music and of sound. And I really appreciate that, because there's one thing to do something in a certain time and it has to be a cry and shouting it out loud, you know,
mm,
as you mentioned in your example of the Ukraine. But there's another thing of something lasting and soothing, and I think this is very important too.
mm, mm.
So each
I
at
think
its
there's
time.
there's
Mm,
something that which is I found very challenging working with the river, and this will sound maybe
Yes.
weird, but is its beauty.
Ah, yes.
Extraordinary beauty of this Swiss river, you know, the
Yes.
purity of it, its
Yes.
exquisite essence,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
And I found it actually quite, you know, in a
Yes,
time when we are confronted with so much
exactly. Exactly.
devastation, is like to be
Yes.
confronted with this beauty that
Yes.
just simply transcends
Yes.
time.
And
Yeah,
still is there. Yeah, yeah,
is
yeah. Yeah.
there.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think part of that feeling of being confronted was like, oh, are we allowed? Are we allowed to even
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
experience that?
Yes. Yes. But how do you do? I mean, this is very interesting, and it reminds me on my friend, my very, very good friend Rupert Huber, who is also
Yes, the
um,
conductor. I've worked with
yes, the
him.
conductor. Ah,
Yeah.
you worked with him. Ah, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And he went to the shamans and
Mm.
goes there to Nepal and does these ceremonies and celebrations of the
Yes.
earth and of the trees, you know, and the plants, and it's very, very deeply felt,
Mm.
and it's almost religious, but it's beyond any particular religion, you know.
Mm. Mm.
And but for me, it's difficult. How do you express it? I mean, how do you
Mm.
express this beauty of the river? Could
Mm.
it be a very beautiful flowing melody,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
it's not allowed because
Mm.
we
No, but
don't
we
live in
allow
this
ourselves
reality?
this beauty.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting. You mentioned your friend Rupert Huber. I know his story, you know, that he was
Uh-huh.
attending a shamanic ceremony and the shaman pointed to him and said, you must come and study with me, otherwise you'll die.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, and then that's
Yes.
what he did with his family.
Yes.
He went to Nepal, right? And
Yes. To live
became
there. Yes.
became this shamanic practitioner, and that's the
Yes.
other side of his life. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's amazing. You know, that really is, you must change your life, you know, that
Exactly.
Rilke
Exactly.
line.
Yes. Yes. Which we never do normally.
Well, yeah, well, as artists, we sort of do, I think. We try to
Okay.
anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Um, but
Mm.
yeah, I mean that you know, a lot of shamanism is about addressing the visible, the sublime, visible face
Mm.
of nature, you know,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
and the visible face, you know, that we can perceive, but
Yes.
the other side of the face
Yes.
faces the
Yes.
invisible world, and
Yes.
you have this intermediary, you know, that you can
Yes. Yes.
travel between the worlds. You know,
Yes.
that's kind of what shamanism is, I guess.
Yes. And music can be a
Yeah.
tool for
Music,
journey.
yeah,
Yeah.
as it is
Yeah.
in many traditions.
Yes. Yeah.
That is one of its powers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Mm. And
Do
have
you do?
you, sorry, go on.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask, do you want to go further into it? I mean, like Eliane Radig also is also one person who went right into this. I mean, for her, it was the Tibetan Buddhism. Uh,
Mm. Mm.
do you think you want to go further into it, or is it something that is so personal to you that it's apart from your daily life, or will it also consume up your daily life, like
Mm.
changing your life
Mm.
in your daily activities? I mean, you are a well-known composer and you work with universities, and it's a modern kind of it's a powerful modern woman's life, isn't it?
What?
I mean, this is so nice, and
Yeah.
I mean,
You
would you
mean
want to change
a
that?
kind of shamanic practice would not allow that? Is that what you're trying to say? Or
Yes, yes, I
yeah,
think so.
yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, yes, I'm obviously very interested in those kinds of understandings and
Mhm.
practices, and you know, there are ways in which I, you know, can weave that into what I do in
Yes.
ordinary life. I mean, I think that's the secret, isn't it? That the ordinary
Mhm.
life
Mhm.
can also be a portal to something extraordinary.
Yes, yes.
I mean, that's what the Zen Buddhists
Yes.
would say. You know,
Yes.
it's actually
Exactly.
how you drink the cup of tea that is
Yes. Yes. You
enlightenment.
do
It's
the
not
same
anything
thing.
kind of special, you
Exactly.
know,
Yeah.
woo-woo thing. You know, it's
Yes.
actually the very basic
Yes.
kinds of
Like you do the same thing in a different way or
yeah,
in
yeah,
different
that's right. Well, that's
spirit.
Cage said that as right, didn't he? You know,
Yes.
like before and
Yes.
after, it's the same. It's just that
Yes.
you have another perception
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
of it. Yeah. Sorry, where were you going with this? No, I want to ask you, because I think like listening to your mother tongue work, the very
Mm.
extensive work, and I was particularly struck by that middle movement.
The electronical one.
With the voices, the
Yes.
language.
Yes. Mm.
And that was a way of you to connect to your ancestral language.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. And
Yes. It
what
was.
happened when you when you
Well,
made that work?
it was mm, well, funnily, it's one of the pieces, like the George Floyd piece, which was a very direct reaction to sort of failure or
Mm,
misery, that made me want to express it in a maybe in a positive way or in a constructive way. Um, I, as you know, I think I told you I was a refugee of the Biafra War, and I came to Switzerland when I was 7. And when I came to Switzerland, I had to deal with a new reality. I mean,
mm,
like all refugees, you are
mm,
in a different land, and you have to adopt, you have to integrate somehow, uh, and you have to like the country, and you have to make the country like you,
mm,
So this assimilation and adaptation is very tricky,
mm, mm,
So maybe I'm quite extreme that I know very fast how systems work,
mhm,
and I can adapt to systems quite easily. So I learned the language, the Swiss language, within 2 or 3 months. I could speak
amazing. Yeah.
quite fluently, but at the same time I lost my mother tongue
Mm,
at the same pace. After three
mhm,
or 4 months, I couldn't speak any word of Igbo
mm,
anymore,
mm,
my
mm.
native language.
Yeah.
And, and this is something people say, this is something that is underneath your skin, that is right on top of your soul, so to say, your mother
Mhm,
tongue. You
mhm,
will never
mhm,
lose it,
mhm,
whatever might happen to you. But I immediately lost it. And,
mm,
and the thing is that I tried to get it back. I mean, I
mhm,
learned Igbo with course, with books, with
mhm,
people.
mhm.
Later on, with the internet, all different kinds of methods. But it just didn't come through. There was something
Right. Okay.
blocking me to learn
Yeah.
this.
Mm,
Maybe psychologically, I don't know. Some people say if you have a trauma, then it's good to forget things, and
mhm, mm,
so for your well-being, you just have to forget it. Maybe it was that, but maybe it can be a different reason. But I still kept in touch with my mother. And when I
mhm.
visited her, she was living in Texas that time. It
Wow.
was 2011, I think. um, I visited her, and I tried again. I asked her, well, could you teach me Igbo? Because you are
Mm,
my mother,
mhm,
you are the
mhm,
person to teach me my mother tongue, really.
mm,
And she was very happy about my interest. And she said, yes, of course, we will have lessons. And I was there for maybe 10 days or so, 1 week. And I thought maybe I could just grab the basics of the language.
mhm,
And she said, well, the basics is actually you have to learn the proverbs. The proverbs in our
mm.
culture
Yeah.
are the basics of thought and of language and of everything. Our culture is the proverbs, really. And in fact,
Yes.
there are dozens of Igbo proverbs, being exchanged and
Mm.
And so she taught me instead of verbs, she taught me proverbs, whole sentence.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, it made sense, and it has a rhythm, and it has a
Mm.
melody and color, and but I couldn't do it. I just
Okay.
couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I was recording her voice,
That
and then
must
I
have
thought
been special. Yeah.
it was really nice, and for her it
Mm,
was very normal. She was just speaking into it, and she translated it in English to me.
mm,
And I thought then in Switzerland I would have the chance to slowly, learn the proverbs and then the verbs and then the grammar, maybe something like that.
mm-hmm,
I didn't learn it,
mm-hmm.
but then I thought maybe I could use the tape, the recordings for a piece. And that's how this piece
So it's
came out.
actually your mother speaking on that.
It's my mother.
Oh,
Yes,
how
it's my mother.
wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's super
It's a,
intimate.
yes, it's a
Yeah.
homage to her. I mean, she has
Yeah.
died
Mm-hmm.
about 1 year ago. She died,
Okay.
and I'm so glad I did it because
Mm.
for her it was beautiful. She didn't understand what I was really doing, why I was doing
Sure.
this. She
Yeah.
just thought it was for learning Igbo. And in a way, I learned a little bit Igbo, not the
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
I learned her voice, and her.
That's right. The colors and the melody, yeah,
Exactly.
of
Yes.
her voice. That's so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah,
And the
gosh. I mean, it's a huge topic, isn't it? The intimacy of the mother tongue and
yes,
just the
yes,
registers of, the emotional life that
yes,
can be
yes.
given in that
Yeah,
tongue, let's
yeah,
say.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's
Mm,
very, it touches so many things. It's physical, it's
mm,
also sexual,
mhm,
it's essential, it's
mm,
psychological, and it's also scientific, it's something.
mm.
And I wonder, how was your approach? Because, you don't just choose the title mother tongue just for the beauty of its word.
Yeah, I mean that was I invited a poet, Patricia Sykes, to write some poems on this
Uh-huh.
topic, and she focused on endangered languages because many languages are disappearing all the
Uh,
time. Just like in the natural world, species are dying off. So are
mm,
languages, and when
mm,
we lose a language, we also lose knowledge, ways of thinking and understanding the world. And
mm, mm.
there are many examples, of well, in Inuit, which has all these words for snow, and these experiences which can't be translated or captured in in another register of
Yes,
language. So
yes,
yeah, so
yes.
the work is kind of contains these different sort of endangered languages, including an Aboriginal, some words
Ah,
from Aboriginal languages,
yes.
and so it was kind of about the fragility of these things. And actually, that was a piece from 2005, and I've shifted a little bit in relation to how I thought about it, because at the time
Mm.
the focus was very much on endangered language, things disappearing. But actually, one of the languages, Yorta Yorta, that is set. It's a language from the area where I live, actually, in
Uh-huh.
Victoria, is being revived. So languages can also come back to life,
Oh,
which is
really?
kind of
Wow.
one of the things
Wow.
that you are longing to
Yes,
experience as well
yes.
yourself. Um, and so, is to also be a little bit careful around those narratives of extinction and disappearance.
Yes.
That's a kind of choice in terms of the story you
Uh,
tell, and you can actually tell other stories. And so it's kind of made me more aware of that sense
yeah.
of um um where does that story come from? Is it the necessary story? And yeah, so I kind of feel a
Yes.
bit different about that piece now. I mean, it's
Yes.
more than I don't know, it's like 18 years
Almost
old.
20 years. Yes.
Yeah, so
Uh-huh.
that's an earlier
Uh-huh.
piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's interesting
But
we chose the same kind of title for
yes.
our
So
works. Yeah. Yeah.
it's not linked to your mother tongue. It's not
Oh,
in this
it
sense
is actually,
personal.
yes, because
Already.
because I don't speak, like my first language is Chinese or Hokkien, which is
Okay.
a so-called dialect, though it's actually a different language You know,
Really?
all those
Ah,
dialects are actually different Chinese languages.
ah,
But it's not something I speak, you know, normally. I mean, I still know some of it, but it's not in
ah,
everyday use. So I was also reflecting on this sense of loss, you know,
yeah, yeah.
and what disappears with that. So yeah, I mean, it's not a million
Uh,
miles, I guess, from aspects of,
yes,
you
yeah.
know, your topic. Yeah.
Do your children talk hockey?
Hokkien, no. I mean, I have a son, and
Uh,
he doesn't. I mean, he has a Chinese name, but he doesn't speak English. He doesn't speak
uh,
Chinese. Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm, mm. But
Yeah.
you never lived in China. Your
No,
parents.
I mean, no, I mean, my parents were part of a big migration from southern China. My grandparents were part of a big migration from southern China in the 20s.
Uh-huh.
Part of this big flow of people to Southeast Asia.
Uh,
So,
yeah.
so
Uh,
actually, maybe this is also kind of interesting, in that the kind of Chinese culture I grew up with and I'm familiar with
yes.
is diaspora culture, right? So it's at one
Yes.
remove from the so-called
Yes.
originary place,
Yes.
um, and in exploring that, I was very interested in rituals that are practiced in a sort of hybrid and transformed way that don't even exist anymore in the
Yes.
home
In the
country. You know,
mainland. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
this is one of the big stories of migration. You know, that
Yes.
sometimes migrants hold forms of
More.
culture, right, which have
Exactly.
actually moved on and done other
Exactly.
things.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just one of those interesting cultural phenomena. And Australia
Yes.
is a place where you really see that because it is a
Yes.
country which has, you know, been populated by many different waves of
Yes. Yes.
migration. Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
uh. So going back to China is not something really special for you, I guess. It's not
Well,
more
it's not
special.
home, let's
Yes.
say, in that, in
Yes.
the same way that,
Yes.
I don't know, do you feel that going to Nigeria, is that home?
Yes, I think it
It
still is.
is.
Yes,
Okay, interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't do it often. I mean,
Hmm.
well, actually, I never do it. I just did it 3 times within 55 years.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay. Yeah. Hmm.
so I don't really know, but the
Hmm.
feeling of it is really like
Hmm.
the red earth is my home, really there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's how I feel.
Yeah.
But it's not reality, feelings
Mm-hmm.
are more than what you really experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's fantasy or it's an illusion or it's
Mm-hmm.
wishful thinking or something. But it's something that gives me inspiration and which is creative, which is
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
So are
Mm.
you continuing with some of that kind of, you know, language and the sounds of place in newer projects?
I'm not sure. I'm doing a piece with Ekmele
Hmm.
uh, vocal ensemble.
Yes, in New York,
You,
yeah.
I think you
Hmm.
know it, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And there, obviously, it will be language.
Hmm.
Uh, but apart from that, um, I'm very much interested in movement
Oh,
lately. I mean,
okay. Yeah.
it's I it's like a idée fixe, something like a
Hmm.
spleen, even that I feel like musicians have to move. They have to
Mm-hmm.
move, and it must show that it's a personal thing more than
Okay.
playing music. It's a relationship, and I would like to enact this kind of relationship
Hmm.
within the ensembles, which
Okay.
is something they don't like. Of course, they want to play music, they want
Oh,
to play
no.
good
I mean, I
music.
think there are lots of people interested in that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So I think
Okay.
it goes into
Yeah.
that direction,
Yeah.
like distances and approaches and yeah. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
how you
Yeah.
carry sound in the room. I mean, it has done before, but I want it more in a very physical
Mm-hmm.
body kind of
Mm-hmm.
way. So that the body of sound reflects the body of the person, really.
Mm. That sounds wonderful. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I'm sure you just put it out there, you know,
yeah,
and a
yeah.
group will appear and go, wow, I want to do this. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
my daughter is a dancer, and maybe it
okay,
has to do with
yeah,
that, because dance is for me the ultimate and the most perfect, the most beautiful art,
really.
really. Yeah,
Mm.
and I think I'm heading towards dancing in the
Okay.
most universal sense of music.
Yeah, yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I mean, it is this fully embodied kind of
Yes, yes,
experience, isn't it?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I mean, the
Mm.
rhythm is inside the body, the melody is inside the body. You
Exactly.
know, the
Yeah.
carrier of time is the
Yes.
body, other
Yeah.
bodies. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the piece for Lucerne with the river, there's a gestural performer, Winnie Huang, and she's both a performer in the film where she's playing the violin in the river and the
Ah.
river's playing her, but on the
Mm.
stage she activates all of those kind of filmic and recorded sound through
Mhm.
gestures, and that's
Ah.
quite interesting because there's some kind of abstraction. You don't see the instrument, but the instrument
Uh-huh.
is the world, right? It's
Ah,
like she
yes.
conjures
Yes.
forth these yeah, these presences, you know,
Yes.
of the
Oh,
river.
nice.
So anyway, we'll
Nice.
see what happens there.
Yes.
But yes, that
So,
movement, that kinetic element, that
um,
sort of placement, you know, in space is,
yes.
I think, just so
Yes.
essential in terms of the ritual, you know,
Ah, yes.
kind of
Yes.
dimension of
Yes.
performance. Hmm.
So we will see it visually also, the river.
Yes, yes,
Oh, nice.
that's right.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
wow.
Mm,
Very nice.
yeah. So we will meet in real life fairly soon, in a few
Yes. Yeah.
weeks in
Yeah.
Lucerne, and then
Yeah.
also at Huddersfield Festival.
Ah, you're coming too. Great. Oh,
Yes,
nice.
yeah. So I think
Oh,
it'll
nice.
be really nice, and we'll go, oh my
Yes.
God, we did this Zoom, you know, across these time zones, and like here we are, we can have breakfast. Yeah, yeah.
Very nice.
So
Will
okay.
you stay in Huddersfield in the town?
Um, yes, I'm just there for the concert. You're there for longer,
Okay.
are you? You're
For
staying
3 days.
for
I will
okay.
stay
Yeah,
3 days.
yeah.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
Yes. So I look
Yeah.
forward to seeing you
Yeah, me too.
and continuing our conversation, probably, you
Yeah.
know.
I'm sure we will meet again and again.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
nice.
yeah.
Very
Now
nice.
that we've started, and I
Yeah.
think we sort of covered quite a lot of ground in this
Yes.
particular 1 hour. So yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think so.
yeah.
Thank you very much,
All
Lisa.
right, thank you.
Take
And
care
yeah, yeah, you take
and
care too.
have a good
Yeah,
journey to
yeah,
Europe.
yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Lisa. Bye.